Welcome to the Leading at the Next Level podcast with Dove Development and Consulting, the show built to provide ongoing support for your leadership journey. I am Wes Dove, and I have the distinct pleasure, honor, and privilege to chat with a lady that's become a dear friend to me and Cindy. She, her husband, their team they've got a special place in our heart today. I get to chat with Sabrina Dorman-Andrew, the executive director and co-founder of New Creation Virginia. And they do some absolutely amazing work. Sabrina was part of an executive panel at our 2025 Leadership Legacy Experience. And we've known Sabrina for years, and we've become more in tune and really understanding the work that she does, the people that she serves, and the impact that she makes. This year, we have such a cool opportunity with the 2026 Leadership Legacy Experience to have them join in with us as our community partner. So what that means is 5% of all ticket sales go to New Creation. We're also doing some other stuff that we'll talk about here. But before I get into a whole lot of other stuff, I've got notes to keep me kind of on track. Sabrina, I'd love for you to be able to share your background, professional background, a little bit about what you do and the folks that you serve.
Yeah, thanks so much, Wes. I appreciate you and Cindy a lot. I'm so grateful for the way that you love us and our mission and me. And so thanks for letting me come on and talk about who we are and what we do. My professional background, before my husband and I started New Creation, I actually ran a business office for a physical therapy clinic. And before that, I worked in a dental office. So very much in the back end billing insurance world. And so I became passionate about the anti-trafficking movement in 2012, and we began working with an organization in Uganda that was counteracting human trafficking. And so really it caught my heart. I was overwhelmed by the issue, but very quickly I was trying to figure out, what can I actually do? How do I get my community involved? And so my husband and I really just felt led to start a nonprofit here in Harrisonburg called New Creation. We creatively counteract human trafficking. And so one of the big things that we do is we bring our community along with us. And so you and Cindy are allowing us to do that in a new, fresh way.
Yeah, Sabrina, I'm not very good at many things. Matter of fact, I've got a new book coming out in 2027 that's going to be called Leveraging Leadership Growth, Strength Through Great Professional Relationships. And the whole idea is I'm a hillbilly at best, but I've been blessed with some amazing people in my life, and it's opened a lot of doors that I wouldn't have had otherwise. And we were just so thankful to be able to hopefully open doors to you guys that aren't already open. You've got a great reach, you do amazing things, but hopefully we know people that you don't, we can make new connections. So that's where we come into play. Now, you were very, very involved with the idea of leading with clear purpose. You were on the first panel last year where you talked about how you found that purpose, and you just touched on it a little bit for you and Stephen for starting New Creation and the impact you make. And I want to come back to what you said in a little bit about the nonprofit, but I'll fight that urge for right now. Talk to us about that clear purpose and what really spurred you for that specific cause, because hey, leadership's hard in any aspect. Starting a nonprofit is grueling, not just starting, running, maintaining, doing all the stuff. We just talked before we hit the start and the go live button about some of the other things you're working through. Talk about that purpose and how it gets you out of bed as opposed to just trudging through the mud.
Yeah, that's a great question. Honestly, my heart for the issue is so rooted in me being a mom and a girl mom. I actually have two daughters and now I have a granddaughter. And so a lot of what I started learning about human trafficking, it was just not talked about. Nobody was having conversations. And because of the lack of awareness and because of the lack of conversations, it continued to grow. And so I became very outspoken about the issue because I saw that it was something that was happening very much in our community, very much in plain sight, but nobody was doing anything. Actually, Wes, before we founded New Creation, we were volunteering stateside with the group in Uganda. And I was just getting furious, honestly. I was so angry about the injustice. The more I learned about it, the more frustrated I got. And I told my husband one night, somebody should be doing something. And he said, what if you're the somebody who should be doing something? And I like big eye roll, like, really? Me? Because, honestly, I am not, on paper, it does not make sense for me to be an executive director. Okay. I got pregnant in college. I dropped out. I never got my degree. I was a young single mom. I have had a multitude of things that have led me to feel like, well, I'm not equipped. But I believe very much that the Lord has called me to this issue. And so, being a follower of Jesus, I believe that He does very much equip people that He calls. So, it's a very deep calling, like inside of me. It's almost like, you're like, how do you get out of bed? It's like I can't not do something. It is so much in me and more now than ever. And I'm so thankful that my heart has not gotten hard, that I'm so passionate because every woman that I get to serve, it just makes me want to keep doing what we're doing.
I'm in tears as you share that because I didn't get pregnant in college because I didn't go to college.
You can't get pregnant.
And because I'm a man, and that's not how it works, regardless of what people might think or say. But he didn't graduate college either. Cindy didn't either. We've worked extremely hard in our careers. We've had great opportunities, but we often feel that same thing. Who are we to do it? But again, praise God for the relationships and the opportunities, because I mentioned the book that I've got written. It'll come out in 2027. As I wrote the book, I was talking about one specific person. And if he hadn't done what he had done to mentor me 30 years ago now, I think, gosh, where would I be? What would I be doing? And the reality is that obligation says I don't have a choice not to at this point. I've got to do something.
And isn't it amazing, Wes, that like one person saying one thing, right? So like early in my career, I was speaking somewhere and I was speaking in between somebody from Homeland Security and the FBI. And then they're like, what college did you go? All the things that make you insecure. And a friend of mine, Aaron Nolan, he was my board president, and I was just unpacking this. It's something I was ashamed of and really struggled with. And he said, Sabrina, if you had a degree, it would be a PhD in tenacity, and that's going to take you farther than anything you hang on your wall. And I think about him all the time when I'm in spaces where we were in the governor's mansion. I'm like, what am I even doing here? I think back to what that one statement that Aaron said to me that's really carried me and made me not feel ashamed.
Yeah, we were in Texas 12 hours ago, 24 hours ago for sure. We were in Galveston with a group, and one of the guys that came over and talked with us, he's a minister. He was in the Army, and he said, hey, if he can do it for me, he can do it for anybody. And as we talked through, he was talking about a book, and he had a copy of one of mine in his hand, and he said, I need to one day. And I said, dude, you're already doing the work. I'll help you do it. Call me. We'll figure it out. He says, who wants to hear from me in a book? Yeah, somebody needs to hear from you. If you don't put it in the book, you're going to not serve that person that needs it. And he's like, wasn't looking for that. Kind of like you said to Steve, why not you? So now you've talked about it a little bit. Expand on who you're focused on serving, because you mentioned it with 2 daughters and having a grandchild now. Cindy and I have 3 granddaughters, the oldest being 13, and we know that 12 is the age where it starts, right? So talk about who you're focused on serving both stateside and globally.
Yeah, so the two pillars of new creation. The first is preventing it from happening. So that's the part that I got very amped up about, because I recognized if you don't get downstream, it's going to keep happening and the cycle's not going to be broken. And so one of our focus groups is middle school and high school students here in our community. So New Creation helps fund and implement the Prevention Project, which is a specific anti-trafficking curriculum for that age group. We even have a curriculum that can go K through 5. So students are a huge piece. And like you mentioned, the average age of a sex trafficking victim in the US is 12. So that's a 7th grade middle school student. And so that is a way to start conversation, uncover, really unveil the lures that traffickers are using, helping to debunk myths and misconceptions that lead our kids to be very vulnerable. So a huge pocket is that population. Within that, we also do community awareness. So we train law enforcement, medical professionals, teachers, those in the mental health care field. So we really want to equip community members to understand the issue and then help them figure out their part, right? If we all need to do something, this issue is so huge. So that's our local part. Our global approach is job creation. And so when we started New Creation, we were selling jewelry that survivors were making and telling the story and getting funds back to the women. So they really were the ones who were taking care of themselves. We were very much captured by the idea of how do you help women actually have dignified opportunities that empower them, not for you to write them a check. That's not empowering and not dignified, right? So if we can help ensure those coming out of trafficking or artisans, a lot of our artisans would be vulnerable to trafficking without a job. And so we have partnered with over 200 organizations here in the shop. We have a subscription box, we have an online store, we have an app, we do live sales, we have our brick and mortar, we have a pop-up downtown. Like we push products because the products that we push change lives. They are creating opportunity. We know statistically 80% of those rescued from trafficking go back to trafficking without a job. And so we actually see it as preventative too. If we can get in front of the issue through jobs and through education, my hope is by the end of my career, we've moved the needle.
Yeah, you're moving the needle every single day, whether it's statistically or not, I don't know. I think
Yeah.
of the starfish, the little boy throwing the starfish back in. Yeah, that's there. Sorry, I'll get composure again.
Thanks.
It relates a little bit to, I remember it's been more than a dozen years ago. I was hiring a lot of folks, and there was a young man, fantastic young man. His name was Ernie, and he came from Southwest Virginia. He came to the Harrisonburg area, and he had some drug distribution charges. And he said, well, here's the thing, made some bad decisions in my career. And where I'm from, there were two opportunities to make money. You can sell drugs or you can mine coal. And then they shut the coal mines down.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I had. And to your point, if there's no other opportunity, people have to survive. And I love what you guys do. I love the awareness because if people don't know about it, it's easy for it to be going on all around us and we don't recognize it ever. Knowing's half the battle is what G.I. Joe told me when I was a little kid. Right. And then the obligation is there. And for me, it's how do you know and not do?
Mm-hmm.
And
It's true.
so there's some of it, but how do we help? Because you and I have talked
Mm-hmm.
about it, and I've got a little bit of a burr in my saddle about the folks that say, oh, they've got a record, so therefore we can't hire them. And I think it's an obligation on the HR community and all the different resources that we have to make sure that we can reemploy and have protection and do the right things so they can have gainful employment. But the way you guys go about it is just amazing. So thank you for doing those things. We could
Yeah.
go on for this for days. This is fun. I'm glad
Yeah.
we questions to stick with. Sabrina, we'll talk more about the book shortly. Talk about one of your core values and how you and your team work to model those values for everybody you touch, everybody you interact with.
Yeah. So one of our core values is integrity. It's probably the value that we talk about the most. And so one of the things that I think is really important, not just naming your value, but what does that actually mean, right? Okay. So integrity, how does that play out? And so we talk about being honest and transparent, whether that is us working with clients. So, we're working with very marginalized, vulnerable populations. We're working with students, again, a population that trust is a very important key factor in just the implementation of what we do. We also talk about we honor our commitments. So we do what we say and say what we do, right? We don't overpromise and underdeliver. We're very cautious with what we say we're going to do. And a lot of that actually was rooted very quickly in when I started working with survivors directly. And I noticed how many people promised them things, right, that never came to fruition. Specifically with trafficking, often it's some coercion. So, Wes, I'm going to give you this. You're going to come with me. This is what it's going to be. And then it's a bait and switch. So, when you're working with a population who have been tricked and exploited, it is vital as an anti trafficking organization to make sure that we are never even towing the line of being dishonest. And so that's our work with survivors is like, we want to make sure they know that we are showing up as our honest selves, which helps them show up as their honest self. We want to be open and transparent. We want to do what we say and say what we do. And then the other side of it is we're a nonprofit. So we have to have people writing us checks, right? If the community was not supporting us, New Creation would not be here. And I knew very little about nonprofits when I started New Creation, but the more I was around and the more I had conversations, I recognized that there was a lack of integrity with some of the groups that
Mhm.
I've seen. And I just kept thinking, I want to make sure we steward our resources, whether it's our money or our time or this property. This property is a resource that we want to steward well, because I wanted to make sure people knew they could invest in what we were doing. and that we were very much transparent about these are our values, this is our mission, this is how it's going to get executed. I want people to be excited to give to us, not give with the nervousness of what's this money actually going to do, because I hear that often. What's the money that I'm giving to XYZ organization, what's it actually doing? I can sit down and tell you exactly, right? I can tell you by name, even though I won't tell you her name. And so that the integrity, and my dad, I remember him, my dad was a business owner. And he told me one time, the best thing that you can do is be the best version of yourself, even when nobody's looking. Do the right thing, even when nobody's looking. And so, how do we live above reproach in a way that even if people don't ever see it, we can rest easy knowing that, like, we've done the best that we can and we've shown up in the ways that we feel called.
Yeah, Sabrina, I'm going to come back to the nonprofit after the statement. So 48 hours ago, again, in Galveston, Texas, talking to a friend of mine, CEO of a large company, and he's talking about how, hey, we tithe. We've got a church that we're very close to, but that's not the only place we tithe, because the reality is I don't always know that they're using the money the way they say they're using it, and they won't open their books. I get fed there, I still go, but it's a reality. We've got to be very, for Cindy and I, we're in the very not nonprofit, albeit we don't always make profit. But the reality is we're not a nonprofit, but we need to be very transparent in what we do. I need to make sure that I don't even want to give the perception of anything less than above board.
Yeah.
That's who we've got to serve. The integrity speaks. Now, you mentioned nonprofit a couple different times. You are a nonprofit. You don't take money from the government. All these different things that you guys do some amazing work. We run into so many nonprofits that almost get, I'm going to not necessarily turned off, but there's a disconnect because so much of my background has been for profit, private sector, stock exchange, globally or publicly traded companies, and so on, where the profit and loss is a big deal. So I talk a lot about how leadership has direct correlations with profitability and productivity. And sometimes that gets lost in the nonprofit space. We're actually speaking in a couple of weeks for a group of nonprofit CFOs who really care about that stuff, that we're translating that message to what's killing your impact and results, and how we still have to be good stewards. That was the word you're using. This is off script, but talk about how it's not for profit. Profit still matters.
That's something that there's a tension in that, right? Like, we actually this morning in our leadership team meeting, I talked about we have to decide what we measure success by, right? What are we chasing? And for us, because we have a shop, our shop is part of our nonprofit, but the profitability of said shop directly connects to how many jobs we can create, how many students we can impact, the fact that we even have a staff, right? And so it's this tension of our mission is to do good, our mission is to counteract trafficking, but finances are the vehicle in which said good work happens. And we have a budget that kind of keeps us in line. We keep our eyes on that. And for us too, I'm always thinking about how do we diversify our financial streams. So yes, we're supported by individuals and churches and businesses, but we also have all of these businesses. We do fulfillment for other organizations. We have a subscription box, right? We have all of these streams. And part of why is I see often in nonprofit work, the work stops because donations are down. And I wanted to make sure there was never, it's one of the many reasons we don't take government money, but one of the main reasons is I saw these organizations that were bolstered by this huge grant, and then the grant went away and their work went away. And so for us, it's equally important, like, for us to be successful, but it's also like, how are we meeting that budget? And can we do it in a way that doesn't put too much pressure on one piece, if that makes sense?
Yep. No, I love it. And the reality is you're running it like a business, because if you don't, you're not impacting the people that you need to make an impact for. So it warms my heart every time we get to talk about this. We learn more about the way you run the organization, what you do. Thank you for sharing all that. I was part of a board, and I won't say the name of it, years and years ago, to where the folks on the paid staff, it almost seemed to me like they were more focused on making sure the grant stayed in place to fund their salaries than they were about the impact they were the people they were impacting.
Yeah.
You said to make sure we're the same person all the time. What you see is what you pray for. Cindy is what I tell people all the time, because what you see is what you get. But understand, it's going to be the same. If you don't like it this time, you're probably not going to like it next time. And
Very
sometimes I
true.
say the stuff that's on my mind, and it's not with ill intent. It's with accountability. Yeah, that's a side note. That's free for anybody out there watching this. Now, for you and Stephen, as you founded it, you had to make sure that your personal values truly aligned with the values. And I'm going to go ahead and see this. You provided an amazing piece, and it was so fun to go back and forth and chat through it as we compiled it for the first part of the real world examples chapter of how new creations values were established. Talk about how you and Stephen worked to make sure your personal values, your as husband and wife, were really embedded in, even if the words weren't the same, but the values really existed in the organization.
Yeah, New Creation was founded in our home. Okay. So when we started New Creation, it was in our dining room. It started in our home. It was very much, there was no work-life balance. Okay. It was inside of our lived home. And some of it just naturally happened because of who we are, because of who we feel like we're called to be, and really who we want our daughters to see us as, because they were watching this whole time. And so I think a lot of Steve and I's values at the core, I mean, we apprentice under Jesus. So I watched the way in which he led and served, the way he loved. And so that's who Steve and I want to be. That's the goal, is moving towards love, moving towards kindness and justice. And so I think a lot of our values are just base core values of Christianity. But then when we started building our core values as an organization, like I said, it started in our home. As it grew bigger and came outside of our home, and we had a leadership team, it wasn't just me and Steve trying to figure it out. We really also wanted to make sure that our core values were there and represented, but that it was representative of the group, because that's really how you get team buy in, not like, hey, these are my values, have fun executing them, right? So instead of trying really hard, and frankly, we, I mean, I don't know how this happened. We have the most incredible team. We were adding to the team people who displayed those values to us. So it was an easier transition. It wasn't like we were hiring people that did not align with integrity or servanthood or justice. Like, we knew those had to be the present. And so I think having the team help actually build out and land on these values was just as important as the way Steve and I founded them.
Yeah, you've met my friend Craig Johnson. He and his family own Waynesboro Landscape and Garden Center. I don't know if you know him real well yet, but you'll get to know him real well over time. I've watched in that organization how they're so intentional about humility, dependability, compassion, integrity, and family, and then visibility in the garden center specifically. I know those values because they talk about them all the time, but I've watched how it attracts, how
Yeah.
they've, while it was values they set, they define them, they help people understand here's what it looks like, and so on. And they've attracted amazing people, not with throwing money at them, not with making promises they can't deliver. Quite frankly, it's a hard industry.
Mhm.
It's heavy work. It's not super, anyway, it's hard industry, but they've attracted good people because it's the right people. And not
Mhm.
100% of the time, things happen, but the reality
Right.
is fun. So appreciate you
Yeah.
sharing that a lot.
Mhm.
Wowee. And I laughed as you said there was no work life balance.
Mhm.
I'm sitting in my office that's in my
Mhm.
home, and if I have my way, it always will be. I don't necessarily want balance. I've got harmony right now. Cindy and I get to work together. You and Steve get to work together.
Mhm.
We're chasing something that we can impact. Balance is an illusion.
It really is. And I think it's become one of those buzzword
Mhm.
things. When people interview me, that's one of the
Mhm.
things they ask, like, how do you define or how do you live work life balance? And I'm like, I don't strive for that, because that's not the goal. The goal for me is to live a life on purpose, for a purpose, with a purpose, and it's going to bleed together, right? And so the other thing that does is allows my team to show up as who they are. I've got team members that have kids that, of course, they're going to be in the middle of, I need to leave early or I need to come in late. I have a staff member who has a an aging father and she needs to be present. So if that means she takes her laptop to that room and sits with her dad, that's what she does. So I think it also creates the ability, like we value our team and that is part of who we are. And so when you stop trying to strive for like, well, I'm clocking in and clocking out, like just be purposeful about how you're living your life. That's a much easier thing to do because balance is unachievable, in my
Yeah.
personal opinion. I'm sure there's lots of books out to tell you how to do it, but I think it's imaginary.
I'm laughing because about 11 years ago, I'm sitting in a small group, smallest group I'd ever been in at the time with John Maxwell. And somebody says, John, you travel. You do. At the time, he was speaking about 250 days out of the year. And it was heavy. Yeah, right. And he was 68 years old at the time. He's 79 now. So it was still, I'm going to say an old man. It's less old to me today. And he laughed at them. And he said, it's an illusion. And quite frankly, it's what people use to be lazy. It's an excuse. He said, it's harmony. And if you're all in all the time and you're not getting fulfillment, well, that's not okay. But for me at this stage of my life, I see the impact I'm having on the people that count on me. It's the most fulfilling thing I've ever gotten to do in my life.
Yeah, that's
Anyway,
good.
it gave me permission. I'm no longer a workaholic. I work a lot, but praise God, I get to work a lot. That means I'm doing
Yeah.
something that
Yeah.
matters. And same for you guys. Now, this is a fun one. Talk about an example of a project or a campaign that you're working on to make a lasting impact.
Yeah, so it's fun because with me being a part of your event last year, and like you said, you and Cindy and I have known each other each year. It seems like that relationship's growing, and the way that you guys want to help us has just continued to exponentially grow. And so I love that you guys approached me this year and said, okay, how can we do this bigger for you? What are the ways in which we can put new creation and your mission in front of our people? Because you guys have wanted to leverage your circle of influence to become our supporters. And so this year, with people being able to buy in, not only are they already donating because you guys are donating a portion, but we even talked about how do we help people become bought in. So, this Freedom Legacy Partner, people are allowed to hop in, to donate, to join us, and hopefully it will be a monthly thing that they continue because what I've noticed about giving, a lot of times it's like popcorn giving. Oh, I gave $100. Oh, I gave $20. And you may never see that donor again. You may not be retaining them. What makes a lasting impact in nonprofits are people who are giving monthly. That helps balance their budget, that helps give them sustainability. And we know, hey, this is the amount of money that our partnerships are giving us. And we don't know what that's going to look like, but we are all very excited about the impact that this event could have on our organization and those we serve.
Well, and Sabrina, I had this conversation with Mandy when I stopped by the store the other day and chatted with her. And the reality is, I hope we can write a huge check with numbers based on that 5% of all the top line ticket sales and so on. I don't know, but I'm more excited about the long-term impact, the lifetime value of those relationships. With the Freedom Legacy Partner campaign, we're not talking about hundreds of dollars a month. We're talking about $12. And for any one person, I mean, I don't know if you can get like the supersized value meal at a restaurant for $12 at this point. We're talking about that for a month, and a whole bunch of little makes a lot.
Yeah. And I think it goes back to what you mentioned about the starfish, right? Like, I think we are looking for these big movements of us doing something grand. And I think often it's like, what's the one small thing I can do? So $12 in our organization educates, it gives curriculum to about 5 students, right? You're able to protect 5 children in our community. And so it's what's the one little thing I can do? Not to get myself, because if it's some big, large, grand thing, we're going to talk ourselves out of it. If it's $12, right? $12, frankly, is my Starbucks order because it's insane.
The opportunity for somebody to become Freedom Legacy Partner says they can yearly help 60 kids. That bet you can't do that with Starbucks or McDonald's or Chick-fil-A or whatever.
And honestly, Wes, for me, like we need funding,
Yep.
but what we need is buy-in. So we need people who care deeply about our work, who will support our shop, who will be corporate sponsors, who will purchase their corporate gifts through our organization. There's so many ways. And so what you and Cindy are really allowing us to do is open up the opportunities for people to engage the way that we want and need them to.
Yeah. And I told Mandy this as well when I was in the store the other day, and that there's a gentleman, wonderful fella. He's I want to say a chemical engineer. He works with a local pharmaceutical company, but great person. And he says, "Hey, me and my family, we've adopted children, not physically,
Mhm.
but monetarily, in an African country, and they're traveling there for the first time with their church." And I says, "Oh, are you familiar with New Creation?" And his answer was no. I'm like,
Mhm.
"How do you not?" And we talked about it, and it gave me the opportunity to see the event. I had the little postcard flyers that we have for the event. I'm like, "Well, here, you don't need to come to the event. You need to know about them, and here's what
Mhm.
we're doing," and so on. So the reality is, how do we make that visible, the visibility more prevalent with more eyeballs and so on? I hope we do a whole bunch that day. And I
Yeah,
hope
I hope
we
so too.
lead, but more importantly, I hope we open eyes to folks to what you're doing and the amazing, and just as important, it ain't about you. It's not about new creation even. It's about
Yeah,
the impact you're making.
indeed.
Now, let's go back to with today. This isn't your first rodeo. As we have this conversation, your answers are amazing. I'm listening, and as I'm just giddy. I'm in tears multiple times through this. What's motivated you? What's driven you, and Steve as well, to really invest in yourselves over the years? Because being able to articulate it, be able to feel comfort. We talked about sometimes
Mhm.
people aren't comfortable in the videos. Cindy and I did cut the video for the nonprofit thing that we're doing. We cut a short one yesterday to promote it. And the lady that took the video says, "Seems like y'all done this before." And so we have. We've done a whole bunch of times. We've invested a heck of a lot of time and energy into this. What's been
Mhm.
that for you guys that said we've got to keep sharpening
Mhm.
the ball?
I think for us, it's because we care so deeply about our mission. So when I talk about and think about investing in myself as a leader or investing in my team, it's an investment in our mission, right? If we're leading weekly and we're leading in a way that is not, first of all, like with integrity, but also like with the changing times. A lot has changed since I founded New Creation. So the
Mhm.
way that I lead or led back then and the way that I lead now, it's just different. And so we've always, I shouldn't say always, because I would say in the very beginning, I was not thinking very much about strategy and leadership. It was the more I grew and the more I got people around me who started using language that I was like, I need to strengthen that. And public speaking was something that I hated. Like I got barely a C in college in public speaking. She pretty much told me I was terrible. And now I get paid to speak, which is kind of
Mhm.
funny, right? Ironic. But I knew that I needed to grow in that because I needed to be able to communicate what we do to get buy-in. I needed to be able to know how to tell stories with our leadership. It how do we also invest in ourselves and our team? And so like us being able to bring our team to the legacy event last year, that was huge because I honestly think a lot of the reasons that nonprofits aren't doing it is it's the investment. It's not cheap to take leadership courses, to engage in these events. A lot of times it's just not budgeted. And so for us, we're always looking for, there's a lot of free opportunities, but for us, like being a part of what you guys are doing is huge because you're investing not only in leveraging your community for us, but you're also pouring into our leaders. So Christina, our shop manager, and Steve, my husband, like they attended a workshop, which was great because often people are investing in me. And I want everyone that's part of our organization to be invested in.
Yeah, and the part I remember early in my career, Sabrina, there was an HR manager I reported to, and I share this all the time. I didn't always like him. I always respected him. But he said, if you go to a workshop, if you take this course, if you do whatever, you need to show me how you put it in practice and it moves
Mhm.
the needle forward in our productivity and our profitability, because not just cost avoidance for HR and safety, but how we capture revenue.
Yeah.
Shoot, that's hard. But my
Mhm.
goodness, it taught me to think different.
Yeah.
And that's the piece that we close every, whether it's a keynote, a session. We've been with folks all over the place. We say, if you don't do anything different, you should have stayed at work. If I'm your
Yeah.
boss, I'm firing you for going to something and you're not using it.
Yeah.
Maybe not
What are
firing
you
you.
implementing? That's what we talk about. We'll go to
Yep.
conferences and it's like, okay, can we implement all of the things that we learn? No. And we'll drive ourselves into the ground if we try. If we pick one and really be intentional, then it's time well invested.
Yep, 100% correct. Now, this I've alluded to it a little bit. I haven't read ahead in the notes. The notes are to keep me on track. I'm never going to follow them, but it helps me stay somewhat in line. And we'll put the two of us together. We go all over the place. So having an outline helps. I deeply appreciate you taking the time to be a contributor to the values advantage. And because I think it serves people. But what you wrote an amazing piece. You outlined, here's how as a board we nailed our values down. Here's what we did. You're going to be an executive panelist. You'll be on the first panel. That's very intentional. You set the stage for it. You, Gil Coleman, my friend Dr. Rob Walker. He's based in Richmond. Some wonderful, amazing people on that first panel. Talk about what you know at this point about the idea of identifying the values, modeling the values for the team, and really cascading that and modeling those for the communities that we serve, and what organizations, if they embrace that idea, how they can use that values advantage framework, what they can expect from that process.
I think it gives you clarity, actually, because I think a lot of us, especially in the nonprofit world, we're very clear about what our mission is. And sometimes we get lost in what our values are. So, how I see values is it creates clarity. It also helps in decision making, right? Like, I am given so many opportunities, and a lot of them are fantastic. But I'm always thinking, if does this yes align with the values? So it also keeps you in the rails where you're not just saying yes to everything and you're not doing everything. And I learned it the hard way because in the very beginning, I was doing everything.
Mhm.
People wanted us to open a restoration home and people wanted me to do, and we were just saying yes because there were no other anti trafficking organizations. And I had a board member who said, you are going to really run yourself down and you will not have impact until you get very direct about the way in which you're going to execute this mission. So without values, you're looking at everything. It's all good stuff. It's all things that need to be done. But we have really gotten majorly focused on what is our part in the anti trafficking movement? What's the role that we're playing? And how are those things being lived out in real life with the values that we've identified?
This is a little bit off script, but it ties to what you just said. Talk about the relationships you have with each of the board members and some of the folks, not companies, because companies aren't entities, they're people within those companies. Some of the relationships you have with some of your bigger corporate partners.
Yeah, we're incredibly fortunate. We're in a very generous community, and our connections, whether it's a board member, I've had fantastic board members who have intentionally poured into me. They've made me mad a lot, right? They're giving me accountability, which is also a big thing for us. So it's like they have sharpened me with their knowledge. That was one thing that I do think I did right out of the gate. I knew very quickly where my weaknesses were, and I found the people that could help me where I was weak. And a lot of those people have been Matt Landis, who is with the Power Connection. He's so brilliant. The way in which he thinks about money and the things that he has helped us exponentially because he's brilliant and he's using his talent for our benefit. And so, whether it's a corporate company that's sponsoring Night of Light, which is our annual gala, or a corporate company who's choosing to buy our products in an ethical way to gift to their employees, I think that they have played such a big role, not just in new creation, but in me personally, because I used to get irritated. My mom would say, you will become who you hang out with, when I was not hanging out with good people. So that's why I was mad. And so I think about that. Who do we surround ourselves with? Who are we linking arms with? That matters because you will become like the people that you're putting yourself around.
Yeah. I asked that question as you talked about the values, and I know it wasn't scripted, and thank you for tolerating it. A
Mhm.
couple months ago, a friend of mine says, it seems like all the folks that you guys work closely with over a long term, you've also got wonderful relationships with. And I said, well, it really boils down to today. It's not always been the case because, like you said, there was a lot of, I just want to keep the lights on. Yes, I need to do this. Yes, I need to. And it was running us too thin. And it didn't always lead to values alignment. And not saying they
Yes.
were bad people. Sometimes it's my fault.
But don't you think being in business and nonprofit, I think we are a business. We happen to have a different tax status. Don't you think that relationships are actually what builds your success? Like,
100%.
I just think about the way in which we are able to engage, the impact that we've had, the trust that we've built, and all of that. It's relationships with the students and schools we're working with. It's the relationships with the community members who are donating to us and shopping. It's the
Mhm.
relationship with the survivors that we're working with, that they trust us to allow us into their story and to help. And so I just think relational impact, we discount it. Going to networking events, sometimes we're like, why are we doing that? This is so annoying. I cannot tell you how many times I have met the person that I need to know in that by building a relationship and showing up. And so I'm in the business of people, not profit. And so relationships, and I know this is totally off scripted, but relationships are such a big key to why people either have success or struggle, because a lot of people are so focused on the bottom dollar and so focused on their profitability, which is important, but they miss the boat when it's like people and relationships.
Yeah, I'm chuckling again about that because I've been toying with writing a book around that idea of people over profit. Because if you've got people, then the profit comes. If you just look for the profit, eventually the profit's going to go away without the right people. Yeah.
Yep.
As I said, as we got to this event, it's a bunch of oil and gas executives. Our topic for Cindy and I, we were talking about navigating or leading through change, navigating mergers and acquisitions. We used a version of our leading with a clear purpose, and we really tailored it to mergers and acquisitions. But before the event, I'm talking with this guy. He was the president of a company that had been acquired. And he says, so what do you think is more important, the processes and the product or the people?
Mm.
People, 10 times out of 10. He said,
Yeah.
100% agree with you. However, I'm not sure the company that acquired my company would agree with you. And I said, well, let's talk a year from now and see what their turnover looks like. I'll bet you they can show, if they're publicly traded, I bet you they can show a profit margin, but I'll bet you 5 years later it won't be the same.
Yeah. Yeah, people have got to come first. It's just, it's the way that we're wired as humans too. Like, we're built for connection. And so I don't know why we take that out of business. We think that's this thing over here. And then it's, yeah, it's crazy to me. The relationships that I've built in new creation, it is just, you wouldn't believe it, Wes. I could just tell you story after story of the way in which one person has connected me to an opportunity, or even school systems. Like, our district coverage is the Shenandoah Valley, so essentially like Winchester, Clark, all the way down to Lexington. And some of these schools I don't have relationships with. Well, I just happened to be at a conference that somebody happened to be in that school district. And so I'm like, man, that relationship will
Mhm.
impact thousands. I mean, we have to date educated 25,000 students, and that has been through relationships and connections. Yes, we needed the money to do it, but frankly, we could have had the money. And I know nonprofits that have the money, and they're like, how are you getting in all these schools? And I'm like, well, I don't give up, and I continue to build relationships, and I continue to show up. And so I think, yeah, it's that balance of like, you need both. But I think leading with the relational piece is just, it's vital in success.
And I asked that about the relationships and the board members, the companies, because our interaction with Matt and Jordan, our interaction with Sarah Hale, our interaction with Scott, our interaction with Thomas, all the different folks that we know that have been interactive, that have
Yeah.
interacted with you, you've got great relationships. And it goes back to, gosh, if our values are aligned, and they don't have to be the same words, but if we've got the same spirit, same heart, the same long-term goals and initiatives to take care of people, it's fun to be with that. And quite frankly, if the values on our line, I'm not sure if I want to spend time with those same people. They can do
Yeah.
their own thing. God bless them. It's okay.
Yeah. It's very
But
true.
I only have a certain amount I can do. Last one that's formal. And this one is, I'm going to tweak it a little bit because you just touched on it. You just said 25,000 school age folks. You've helped raise that awareness. You've touched folks. Amazing that you did that. What advice are you giving them,
Mhm.
whether it's prevention or even on the survivor side, if they want to aspire to be a leader? And I always preface this, I need to make sure to qualify it. Leading and being a supervisor or manager with a
Mhm.
title are two wildly different
Yeah,
things, not the same.
it's true.
if they want to lead, what advice are you giving them to grow into that leadership?
Yeah, one thing that I would say this would be for a student or survivors specifically. One of the things that I love is when survivors find it that they're safe enough to dream. Okay. So when you're living in abuse and exploitation and survival, like they're already surviving, we want them to thrive and we want them to dream. So when I'm working with survivors and they're talking about their dreams, I think mentors, or in the Christian world we call it discipleship, I think mentors are so vital. So I have had mentors, spiritual mentors, business mentors, I've had coaches, I've had consultants, because I always want to learn and I always want to be better. And so I think the best piece of advice is get around somebody who's doing what you want to do, or somebody who's showing up in the world the way you want to show up. Maybe you don't want to be what they are professionally, but you see something in them that you're like, "Oh, that's who I want to be." And so I love, and I've mentored people, and I've loved that too, because it gives you the ability to, like, hey, learn from my mistakes. Don't do some of the things that I did. And actually, if you look at studies, so one of the things that New Creation's working on, I know you know, but we're building a multi-purpose $1 million, well, multi-million dollar multi-purpose barn, and it'll serve as our offices and our warehouses, which is vital. But we're creating dignified opportunities for women who have barriers to employment. So it could be trafficking, it could be incarceration. Like you said, your friend Ernie, I have felony. Like, who's going to hire me? So we want to lower the barriers, and it's going to be workforce training and job development and personal development. But when I started researching success specifically in women, whether they were in a C suite or leading, like you said, you don't have to be in a C suite to lead, but those who are finding success, the common denominator was mentors. Those women had mentors. And so, one of the things that our front porch, the coffee shop and cafe that we're opening, yes, it will be all those things. They will also have an opportunity to have a mentor, because having somebody who's ahead of you in the game is so impactful. And honestly, most of the work that I've done with survivors has been me mentoring them, me loving them, me showing up, me having hard conversations. I've literally had to take one of the survivors I was serving to jail to turn herself in.
Mhm.
Like, that is hard, terrible. Those are not things that I want to do. But when you're mentoring somebody and you care about their well being and you care about their lives, that causes you also to raise the standard and hold them accountable. So I just, mentors, mentors, mentors. You always should have somebody who is pouring into you intentionally, whether it's professionally or personally or spiritually. Like, that is so, so important.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. I'm going to ask one last question off of that, and then I'll tee up the unscripted question I always like to close with, and then I'll talk through the show notes. But based on what you just said, for mentors, how often do you see a mentor when somebody says, "Hey, can I get some feedback from you?" Say, "No, you don't deserve
Mhm.
my time."
I do think be bold and go after a
Mhm.
mentor. If you see somebody, ask them. There's been times where I've said, "Hey, I'm not in a time position, because if I'm going to mentor you, I'm going to have the time to cut out and carve out." So I've had to tell people not in this season. But what an honor and a privilege if somebody's like, "Hey, would you speak into my life?" And I just, yeah, I think it's so powerful. It's the way that I've grown. It's probably been maybe one of the harder things, because it's, you know, accountability is not easy and fun. And having somebody who can call out your weaknesses and call you higher is uncomfortable. But it's those things that, like, sharpen you. And it's those uncomfortable conversations. There are so many things that I have done wrong and where I've missed it, and where mentors have just said, "Hey, you really missed it there. You owe somebody an apology." Those things are just, I just couldn't lead without people, or the right people around me.
And I ask that because so many times I see people reluctant to ask
Yeah.
because I don't deserve it. Like you and I talked with backgrounds, we shouldn't be whatever. I just had to learn to ask. I've got an email that I printed. It's here on my desk. I'm going to frame it. It's from a mentor. He's been a mentor for almost 30 years. And I remember a few times ago, we've had the chance to be in person a few times since, but I hadn't seen him in a couple of years. Cindy and I visited his house in November of 2019, we had just done a collaborative book it made I think a number 8 on Amazon in the bestsellers list with some other friends of ours and so on. And he puts his arm around me and he says, Wes, I'm really proud of everything you and Cindy are doing. And he looks at me and he says, but you're fat. And Sabrina,
Thanks a lot.
and I thought, damn, it doesn't stop with this guy. But the reality was I'd been working and working and working, and I love working out. I've never been athletic, but I enjoy the gym and so on and so forth. But I hadn't. Work had been all of it. And the balance wasn't there at that point. And had anybody else said that to me, I might have hit them in their nose.
Yeah.
But because he said it and Cindy was there, it was in front of all of his friends and neighbors and stuff. They were having a football playoff party or whatever they were doing. And here's this young kid that he's mentored for the last 20 years at that point that he just said he's fat in front of God and everybody. And Wes was.
But I think it speaks to like when you have a mentor, you're giving them permission to speak into your life.
Yep.
Right? Like in my mind, particularly social media, everybody thinks that they have a right and opinion to discuss what XYZ, you're fat or you're whatever. I think having real relationships where you're giving them permission to speak into your life in a way that's shaping it's really unique. And if you've not experienced it, it's invaluable, I think.
Yeah. And I say it jokingly. And he took the time from there to say, and here's why I say it. You're working hard. And if you continue down this path, you won't serve the people. You won't be able to maintain the pace. Something bad's going to happen to you. You need to fix it. He loves me. For 28 years, he's been that guy that would punch me in the nose, figuratively, with that stuff. And that mentor's there. But I go back to, I had to ask because in 1998, 1999, and 2000, I had to solicit it. He wasn't going to chase me down to do it.
Yeah.
And for now, almost 30 years, we haven't been in the same city for 20 years. But I know if I pick up the phone and say, dude, do you have a minute? Not right now, but here's when I do. Okay. So all you need to do is ask. I love that. And a lot of times the folks that we're talking with, the younger folks, the survivors you mentioned, they might not feel worthy. And that mentorship's there and people are willing to say yes. Sorry for carrying that point on, but powerful.
Yeah.
The last question, I'll give you a second to think about it, is what did I not ask you that I should have? Now, as you think about it, I'll say in the show notes, if you're accessing the video version of this, it's through our Leading at the Next Level community. It's free access. It's on the Leadership Legacy channel. It's exclusively available there. If you're on the podcast, catching the audio, sign up for it. There's links in the show notes for that too. But more importantly than anything of mine, I want you to make sure you know the newcreationva.org website's there. The New Creation LinkedIn link is there. Their Facebook page is there, as is Sabrina's. I really want you to learn about New Creation for what they do and how a whole lot of littles can do a whole lot big and the impact that they make. And hey, they need all of us because it's our way. I can't do what Sabrina does, but because we can help them a little bit, it helps them have more opportunities to do what they do. Now, here's your question.
I always love when people ask, okay, but what can somebody actually do to help, right? So you laid out like connect with us. But if somebody's like, oh my gosh, I've listened, I want to know more, I want to do more, the ways that people can get involved is one, to be educated. So we have a free, it's called On Watch. It's a free training that anybody can do. And every module is a different real survivors story, real survivors in the US, and the ways in which that took place in their life. So what were the lures? What were the vulnerabilities? So the first is be educated, because most people have major misconceptions about trafficking. Be educated. The next is support us in the shop. That's a very fun and easy way, whether you're stopping in our shop at South Main. If you own a business, get in touch with us so we can start using our resources to do your company swag. If you've got an event, if you're gifting to clients or employees, like shop with us. Those are it's fun for me. I may have a slight shopping addiction. It's fun, but it's a great way. Gift through us, join us through that. And last is donate. So if you can, we'd love for you to come and be a part of the Leadership Legacy event and become freedom partners with us. But if you're unable to attend, there's a multitude of ways. You can donate online. You can stop in the shop and drop a couple dollars in our jar. You can give corporately if you'd like to learn more about what your company could do for Night of Light. That puts a lot of eyes on your organization and helps us raise the funds that we need to do the work that we're doing. So be educated, shop, and donate. Those are three simple ways that people can get involved with what we're doing.
Very cool. Sabrina, I'll have a lot of that stuff in the show notes. We'll talk after we hit the end of the recording about how I can make sure On Watch is something that we can share more readily as well. I've got some other ideas. We'll talk about that. Guys, appreciate you being with us, whether it's live, whether it's in the community, on the podcast, whatever it is. Make sure you connect with Sabrina New Creation and know more about it. We'd love to have you with us at Leadership Legacy. We'd love for you to know more about the Values Advantage and how it can impact your organization. But most importantly, we'd love for you to understand what they do and how we can all help them. Again, a little bit goes a long way, and a whole lot of little bits goes a really long way. Sabrina, thanks for taking the time to do this. As I always close, if you've got a need for continuing education credit, specifically through Sherman HRCI, but we've worked with a number of other entities as well, send me an email at admin@dove-development.net. I'll hook you up with a coupon code of some sort that'll give you a 7-day free trial and then a discount off of any level of access to our full Leading at the Next Level program that's got now close to 200 lessons in it, all approved for credit through a lot of those entities. Make it a great day. Sabrina, we love you guys.